The prerequisite is that Miskolc can provide all of this for its young people. Most importantly, that they are not taken to Ukraine as soldiers, because they want to take them to Ukraine as soldiers, because they are always conscripted in Ukraine. The TISA party and the Democratic Coalition belong to the largest European warmongering parties in Brussels, and there they only talk about war. And since the leaders of major European states have already signed an agreement that they will send and station soldiers in Ukraine, they claim they are doing it as peacekeepers. I fear that these will not maintain peace, but war. And of course, everything we told the youth in Miskolc also requires that our money, the money of the people of Miskolc, should not be taken to Ukraine. That money is needed here. The money we would send is currently missing from the entire European economy, so when someone has the sense to send it, they will later suffer the consequences. We do not send it. The work and fruits of the Hungarian people must benefit Hungary. We will send neither soldiers nor money, and then Miskolc can develop. Since you brought up actors and also mentioned Ronald Reagan, when he became president, he held his first cabinet meeting, which went like this. He said, "There are two things I hate, the communists and taxes. Deal with these. Good day." Colleague Zelensky is not known for this. He also beats people, but in a different way and with different means, because Ronald Reagan also used to beat people back in the day, since he was a screen hero. There's no real difference, just the methods are different. Who are our friends? Well, America. The United States isn't that bad. Maybe you have to shout in the streets sometimes, then the big brother comes in handy, right? Our friends are Chinese, which is a very interesting story. We don't have time for it now, but still, during the communist times, after the Second World War, when conflicts between the Russians and the Chinese were regular, the Hungarian communists always took the side of the Chinese. Even when there were border disputes between the two countries, meaning not between us and China, this is not relevant here nowadays, but between China and Russia, at that time the Hungarians were always reserved and leaned towards the Chinese. There is a long-standing cooperation reaching back to the period of the Second World War, which I try to nurture so that it becomes not just a hedge, but a large tree as well. We are making good progress. So, our friends are Chinese. Our friends of the Turkic world, which doesn't just mean Turkey, but also Central Asia. This is not an easy matter. The capture of Nandor-Ferivar, Belgrade, the siege of Buda 150 years ago, there are things here. But still, in today's world, we can confidently say that we can count on the Turkic world, Central Asia, and Turkey at a friendly level. I don't want to call it friendship, as that might seem like a provocation, but we have a correct, balanced relationship with the Russians, and that must be valued. It will have great significance in the future. Now, let's see. Do we have friends within the European Union? Well, that's a trickier question. Yet we do have our losses. We are among ourselves here. We can talk about this. I think the low level of German-Hungarian relations is a loss. There are 4 conditions here that are prerequisites for any grand future goals. First, we must stay out of the war. Perhaps there will still be an opportunity to discuss this, but believe me, it is a daily danger. The fact is, Hungary is being forced and dragged into a war. It is not a theoretical possibility. This is not something far away. This is what knocks on the door every day, and I have to keep that door shut with all my strength, every single day. Being drawn into a war is a daily danger for Hungary, so the first prerequisite for any grand future plan is to stay out of the war. The other thing is that we must not give our money to the Ukrainians. This may sound strict, but if you have no money, you have no grand plan. I am sitting there among them. 27 prime ministers and heads of state sit around the table when we meet in Europe, and I tell you quite firmly that they are going to go to war. These meetings are no longer political discussions. In recent times, they have become war councils, where countries larger than ours, Germans, French, and others, talk about how we are going to win, how we are going to defeat the Russians, how we are going to force them to pay reparations, how we are going to make them repay the money we are now giving to the Ukrainians. So these are not children sitting there. These are responsible, elected European leaders, and they allocate the money accordingly. They send it to Ukraine, they spend it on weapons for Ukraine, they spend it on weapons for themselves. In other words, in Western Europe there is real preparation for war.
I recommend to anyone who has the interest or inclination today to read about the period leading up to the outbreak of the First World War. A world war did not begin as a world war. At first, they thought it was a Balkan war. Then it became a European war, then a world war, then there was an American landing in Europe, and finally, the collapse of Hungarian state. That's how we arrived there. So the war is very close, and it's knocking at the door. Above all, because the physical theater of the war is in a neighboring country, not far away somewhere else, but right next door. The Europeans have already given, and I looked at the latest figures, 193 billion euros. Now they are giving another 90 billion. That brings us to around 280 billion. The Ukrainians have submitted a request stating that over the next 10 years, they will need 800 billion euros to maintain Ukraine. Let us call it Ukrainian running costs. This does not include weapons or security. That will be a separate item. The Americans have stepped out of this. Money talks there. They calculated what they needed, took back what mattered to them, and they are financially secure. Europeans, meanwhile, can spend their money on a war if they want to. But how do we get drawn into this? Through the fact that Europe has no money. Because if Europe was developing successfully and had plenty of money to spend on goals beyond itself, perhaps we could still avoid being drawn into a war. But there is no money in Europe. There is decline. There is no money. So Europeans take out loans from bankers and give this money to Ukraine, as loans that everyone knows Ukraine will never be able to repay. Poor country, how could it? And when the loan agreements expire and Ukraine cannot repay, the bankers will take the Europeans' money. In the meantime, they continuously collect the interest. This will ruin Europe. Something has to be said about how we avoid being ruined, and what the European leaders say. They say we will avoid being ruined by winning on the front, by defeating Russia, and by forcing Russia to pay reparations. Well, no one should place any serious bets on a nuclear power paying reparations to Western European countries or to Ukraine. The whole thing is a fairy tale.